So there were what we call some experience with repatriation, both 70s and 90s. 2017 is different because in the 70s and the 90s, we didn't have so much evidence of genocide. This time, because of the technology, played a big role, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Gaza genocide. The technology has really played a difference and to show the world what genocide is all about. So that made a difference in 2017. There are enough evidence, even satellite images, which clearly shows that this is an issue of genocide. Now, I don't want to go into details. Some of these you'll find in the internet. Number of killing is, this is an interesting one. You can have a genocide without killing. A lot of people say, oh, there has to be a lot of death, thousands of death. That's not true. What is important is intent to destroy. That's important. So conditions of life can also create conditions for genocide. So it's not like number is important, how many people get killed. Even with 71, a lot of people will debate as to how many people are. That's not the point. The point is whether the state has created a conditions of life where intent to destroy is clear. As I said, there are satellite images this time to show that the intent to destroy played pretty well. The destroyed villages in Rakhine State, you can see the red spots. So there are, as I said, there are enough evidence this time to argue why it is genocidal. And that's precisely the reason why we saw two verdicts in ICJ, both in fact taking conclusion that we have to get a final verdict, but so far they also think that genocide was committed against the Uyghurs. They burned our house and drove us out by shooting. We walked for 3 days through the jungle. This is a clear case of what would be regarded as genocide. So this is the exodus that we have seen in 2017. People trying to flee the Arakan and come to Bangladesh and take shelter. These are, the refugee population. This is the latest one in August 2024, where you see the number of individuals is 994,100. This is the exact number. People still debate the number because there are refugees who have not been listed or not included in this category. But even within the UNHCR number, this is the latest figure they have, and where they are settled, that is also there. This is a bigger population than Bhutan. Bhutan population is less than 800,000, where this is more than 900,000. But Bhutan took 60,000 years to become Bhutan, whereas this 900,000 in Bangladesh alone, got into Bangladesh in 3 months. And so just to give you a sense, that it's almost a population country within Bangladesh. The Rohingya diaspora is also spread around the world. According to my figure, there are 19 countries where you see Rohingya spread throughout the world, and this is as something similar to the Palestinian diaspora. So you find them the world, but of course, Bangladesh at this moment has the largest number of Rohingyas. Now, in order to understand and go beyond, beyond the issue of genocide and see what is being done and why that is the case, one way of looking into it would be to look at the nature of the Myanmar state. This, I think, we have not done the way one should have done. Myanmar state has been not a classical Westphalian state. We understand when you have one sovereign capital, one state, one national flag, one everything, one. That Westphalian state was never developed in Myanmar. You have fragmented sovereignties out of 135 communities, ethnic communities, you have 8 or 10 with total national sovereignty. It's similar to Afghanistan in many cases. If a community in Afghanistan, it's also they also have a fragmented sovereignty. But Myanmar is a classical case of having fragmented sovereignty. And I think the mistake that the international community did, including Bangladesh, is not to have relationship with other, at least other 8 to 10 ethnic communities, which are equally important in Myanmar state. Because of the Westphalian understanding of the state, the decision was always to keep a relationship with Yangon or community or the city. But not with, for example, not with the Arakan army, not with the War State Army, not with other the current forces. That was not there. Our mind was stuck in the Westphalian discourse, and that also created problem which we can come back later. One of the issues in the Myanmar state now, which has made a difference this time, which was not there so much in the 70s and the 90s, is the conflict between NUG, PDF versus Tatmadaw. So you have the minority community getting divided. That was not so much there. There was a little bit of that in the 90s, no doubt about it. The students' movement, if you remember, some of the students also went to the forest, but it was not in a big way. I think Aung San Suu Kyi decided the peaceful approach, and probably for that reason, she also got the Nobel Prize at one point of time. But this time is different. Whether she has approved PDF or not, but looking at the world, it looks like there's a good amount of relationship between or the chain that Aung San Suu Kyi had, and then we can discuss that much later. But there is a conflict between NUG and PDF at one level, so the state is not what it used to be earlier. There's at another level, there is a conflict between the ethnic armed organizations and Tatmadaw. So you have two levels of conflict. You have NUG, PDF, and Tatmadaw at one level, and then you have the ethnic armed organization versus Tatmadaw at other level. So that has made it much more complex, and sometimes some of the ethnic organizations they align themselves, and we are familiar with the Three Brothers Alliance, where they had an agreement with Tatmadaw with China's what we call direct involvement. So you can see how complex it has become. Now, currently, and this has already been addressed, that in the Arakan, you have a de facto sovereignty in Arakan with the Arakan army controlling most of the areas, not the strategic points, the ports and highways still remain with the Tatmadaw, but bulk of the territory is with the Arakan army, and that has also transformed, the issue of sovereignty in the Arakan region. So, in order to interact or resolve any issues, it's not only Tatmadaw that you have to deal with, you have to also deal with the Arakan army, which has now become a very important factor in the Arakan. Now let's see the pathways of repatriation, given that background, given the nature of the state, and given the genocidal whole history. Let's look into the pathways of repatriation. There have been several pathways. One, of course, the starting was the bilateral pathway between Bangladesh and Myanmar. There have been several meetings between them, not so much after 2022, but it has not done any difference. We haven't seen any repatriation. But this is one pathway. As we go through, let me also flag that all the pathways are important. I will not throw away any pathways. Okay? We don't know even now which one will work. The pathway that we'll be talking about, and that Kausar has flagged a little bit, would be an additional one, but not throwing away the other pathways. The other pathways are equally important. So, pathway one, bilateral. Then you also had a multilateral pathway with UNHCR, getting involved, but that pathway also has not really made any difference as of now. Then you have a tripartite pathway. You had Bangladesh, Myanmar, and China got together. This is the only country which has a tripartite pathway. Early on, Japan wanted to also create the tripartite because when I raised this issue with the Japanese ambassador, he pointed out that very early on they also thought of a tripartite approach with Japan's involvement, given that Japan is friendly towards Myanmar and also friendly towards Bangladesh. But that has not come up. I say same thing to the Indian policymakers that why don't you start a tripartite approach? Why just blame China not having any progress? Why don't you yourself, given the fact Delhi also had a good relationship with Myanmar and also Bangladesh. But so far, there is no other tripartite approach. This tripartite approach is still there. When you talk to the Chinese officials, they will still say that we are trying, but it's not easy to convince Myanmar. We don't have that much power, but still they are hopeful. Every time we talk about which time the Chinese officials would say that they are hopeful that the tripartite approach will materialize about the time. The fourth is the accountability approach. This is also very critical, and there has been very good development on the accountability issue. Of course, the ICJ ruling, the provisional ruling that you see in June 2020 is very important, mainly because the Rohingya got recognition in the World Court in the first time, where Rohingya as a community was recognized as Rohingyas. So that I think is a big achievement on the part of the Rohingyas. ICJ also rejected in July 2022 Myanmar's objections in the Rohingya genocide case. So this is one accountability approach. It is still there, and as I say, that all approaches are important. Though this is more time-consuming, but it is also very critical. USA also has come up and formally declared on 21st March 2022 that Myanmar military has committed genocide and crimes against humanity. But this too has not made difference. We have Mount Journey here. I have his quotation on this that US will not interested and Myanmar's neighbors see it through economic lens. So international coalition for Rohingya needed, and maybe he can talk more of this later. The Argentinian lawsuit is also important, and we have to look in here. This also has made quite a difference. As I say, this pathway is also very critical because really created, a kind of space for a lot of researchers to work on the issue of Rohingya and on the issue of genocide in Myanmar. And there has been a ruling on 13th February 25, where some of the offenders have been charged. So this is the other approach that we see. Then we have the pathway, fifth pathway, imposing sanctions. That has not really worked. Some countries have done, but limited sanctions on officials, some bank accounts. But then there are countries which have not joined. Japan, Australia, India, South Korea, none of them joined this sanction. So this is the other approach that has not really worked much. So I come to the last and the final one is the learning from crisis. I've been working on the Rohingya issue, I think, from 1990s onwards, given my what you call little bit of knowledge on this issue, I thought why don't we add one more? And this goes back to Sun Tzu and Albert Einstein, where in the midst of chaos there is also opportunity. Every crisis creates opportunity. Let's look for opportunity. What is the opportunity that we can get? So learning from crisis, absolutely. If all the other five, and there are two or three more, I think, in one of the papers that got published in Nazim Ibrahim's book, I think there were 8 pathways. You don't see much progress. So let's add one more. And so this is the one that we want to add, and this is the economic incentives for investing in a minimum plan. Now, recently I also heard Prince Turki of Saudi Arabia talking about a Marshall Plan in Gaza. And as Kausar was talking about the smart support, the partner we have in Canada, they are involved in mapping the Gaza Marshall Plan. So the idea of Marshall Plan has really got attention to many. Now this is important. Very few people give credit to Mr. Marshall now. He got a Nobel Prize. We also forget that. But United States at that time was very different United States, not the United States we see now. It is highly polarized United States we see now, particularly with Donald Trump and the conflict. They have the deep state on the one side, but back in the 40s, United States were very different. It's almost, I think, the first time a country sat before the war ended to see how they can help the defeated power. This has never happened in history. In history, a defeated power was never helped, was never supported. You just take everything from the defeated power. This was a breakthrough. Anyone can talk about capitalism, one can talk about United States profit, all over. You can do that. But the fact remains, this is an extraordinary imagination that Mr. Marshall had, and his speech at Harvard University on June 5th, 1947. Not all confident. By then, he was ready with the plan. The plan started almost 3 years before that. Not only the reconstruction of Germany, but reconstruction of Japan, both defeated powers. And United States came out a big way, supporting the infrastructure, the health sector, the education sector. This has not happened in the history of humankind. So this is a major breakthrough. And I think this idea of Marshall Plan has not really caught attention in other conflict situations. That's unfortunate part. So now that Prince Turki is talking about in the Gaza Marshall Plan, and some of us talking about in the Arakan region, in Myanmar, have a Marshall Plan, I think can hopefully can make a difference, because keep in mind the French and the Germans fought like that. They fought 3 big wars: the Ukraine War, the First World War, and the Second World War. And look at the number of people that were killed in the Second World War. No one could beat that. In 6 years, 66 million people were killed. That means every year, 11 million people were killed. No war could go into that before. And of course, there was series of genocide during that time. But now look at France and Germany. If you cross the border, you can hardly know that because what has happened. I believe Marshall Plan has very different. And they took the whole of society. They did not take any particular community. They did not, sideline the minorities or any linguistic community. They took the whole society and tried to work. And that, I think, has really made a difference, to the point that in 1953, Marshall gets the Nobel Prize for the right reason. Now, this is where we think that we need to start working on what are the investment opportunities that we can have in the Arakan. Now, this has come very recently. In last December, the UNHCR took a delegation to Rohingya camps. I think we were five altogether. The UNHCR wanted to show their programs in the camps, and I was one of the 5 in that team. Now, one of the projects they had was connected to CRRIC University, the Center for Peace and Justice. They had a project there where they were giving training, vocational training to the Rohingyas. So I met around, I think, 25 to 30 Rohingyas. They were in the late 30s, all of them, and they were well versed in English language. Both of them were into computer science, etc., and so they were being trained there. So one of the questions that I raised, that okay, fine, that you got all this training, what do you want to do in the future as a social scientist? I will work on future. So one of them got up and said that he wants to go to Canada for higher studies. I said, okay, fine, if you want to go to Canada, but what will happen to your community? So he became very silent. Then two or three got up and said, no, no, we don't want to go anywhere, we want to go for a community. I said, fine, if you want to go for a community, do you have a health policy? Do you know how many hospitals you will need? How many doctors you will need? Where will medicine come from? The pharmaceutical companies. Have you worked on the health policy? And the answer was no. What about education policy? Do you know how many schools you will need? How many whiteboard you will need? How many teachers you will need? Who will publish the textbooks? Have you worked on that? I said no. And then I went on, what about the agriculture policy? Do you know where the fertilizer will come from? What kind of crops are you going to grow? Have you worked on that? The answer was no. So I went on and I said, look, somebody has to work on that. And it has to be you. And I was then giving my experience back in 71. My experience in 21, I was just a class 9 student, which would be probably 14 years, I think 13, 14 years, okay, anyway. And I remember, and I left my parents, did not tell them, I went to India, to Agartala. I literally slept on the pavement on the first night. We didn't get the space. So I went through that experience. And I told them, look, even as a student of class 9, though during those times, class 9 students were quite immature because I used to smoke also. And not like this, I used to smoke like Che Guevara. So you read and you learn a lot. The only book that I took with me was Marx and Engels' German Ideology, which is quite a complicated book, but I had it with me, and I still have the book. My students then framed it and said, no, Prof, this is a historical book. So, class 9 student reading German Ideology at that time was not an exception, I would say, which you don't see now. But I was telling them, look, even then we were thinking what education policy Bangladesh should have, what kind of infrastructure we are going to have, all those things. So you need to debate and discourse, so they could understand. So these are some of the areas, agriculture, health, manufacturing, looking at the investment opportunities, infrastructure, mining, education, and of course we can go on. Our task, and I mean UCL and Winnipeg and us, is mainly to focus on some of these areas. And as Dr. Kosa was saying, that in September we want to present the short report of our findings. How to go about. It is now being researched at this moment as I speak. And that report, after having discussed, we want to take it to some of the places. But I have literally done a little bit of work from July onwards. In July, when Bangladesh had, what you call this whole revolt that took place in Bangladesh, I was not in Dhaka. I was in Japan at that time, interacting with Mr. Sasakawa of Sasakawa Foundation, who is also Japan's reporter to Myanmar, and of course the head of also the chairman of the Myanmar Foundation. He was very keen on this idea and he said it looks interesting and we need to pursue. I did the same thing, went to Indonesia, discussed the same thing in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, of course China, and also with the US, some of the US policymakers, including a person who was involved in drafting the Burma the Burma Pact and also the Burma Act and the Rohingya Act. So it looks like it's a win-win situation because you don't eliminate anyone, you are not negating the other approaches, you are keeping the other approach, you are just adding to it. As I say, if Europe can make a difference with Marshall Plan, and since they also started thinking that how to create a kind of a structure where everyone will feel comfortable and you try to win the consent. Because so far, whatever approach we have, Tatmadaw and Arakan Army, and I had a little bit of interactions with them in Thailand, in Kuala Lumpur, even they also see merit. Not they are agreeing to think, we don't have the report as yet, but the very idea, they think it's more what we call a kind of a win-win situation for all, and a saleable one. Because all the approaches that we have up until now, somehow you can push them, but Myanmar military, the Tatmadaw and the Arakan army don't see any benefit for them. They see what the benefit. So they want to prolong it as long as they can, because they don't see any benefit. So I remember telling them in one of the meeting, saying they are, and we all know that they are openly involved in narco-terrorism, in narco-trade, and I worked on narco-trade earlier, and I know how much the profit can be. So the idea is that if you can show, after you have done your homework, sit down and show that, look, in narco trade, your profit can be $3 billion, but if you have a Marshall Plan, you can have $10 to $15 million, and this is much more helpful because, the narco trade is not going to take you anywhere. The chances are that you can create conditions, as it has been done with the Germans and with the Japanese after the Second World War. So how do you do that? You need to go for a multi-track diplomacy. I always resist track one. I tell all of the government, no, you stay behind. You don't come now. You come much later when things mature at one stage. Some of them, they know, but sometimes it doesn't work. So even as you know, some of the policymakers are now talking that, oh, we are interacting with Arakan army, and immediately we found Tatmadaw getting angry, which is, I see no reason why they should not, because it is after all, Westphalians understand Westphalian state. So how do you handle the whole thing is important, but the approach is you use all the tracks as much as possible and start from track 2, as Dr. Kausar was saying. That's more important. And if need be, you can use the business sector at track 3, become a one man, and use the other tracks as well. Now, I've tried to see who would be the stakeholders. There are actually 10 stakeholders. You have to convince not the entire world, but you have to convince some of the countries. And I have already spoken to key policymakers or some of the policymakers in all of these countries, whether it's Bangladesh, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Myanmar, Singapore, Thailand, and the United States. And these are very key stakeholders. So there is no what you call you're not going to get a zero-sum situation because one can invest in health, the other can invest in infrastructure, other can mining. You're not going to find the next number of areas where you can really invest if you want to. And if it's an open bidding, whoever gets the best bidding gets into. So point here is what you need is to change the geopolitics of conflict. Now, when we talk about geopolitics, it's always been of conflict. And the reason is the history of geopolitics, the very birth of geopolitics, is a very Eurocentric word. I'm sure you're familiar with that. The very birth, whether it's Mahan, Mackinder, Zelen, name anybody, it all was very geopolitics of conflict. And the idea was how you colonize the world. So if you control Central Europe, you control Europe, and if you control Europe, you control the rest of the world. So whether it's Mackinder or Mahan, they come to the same level of how do you colonize the world. That is no longer possible given the decolonization and globalization. Both has changed and transformed. And you have seen the rise of China, the rise of India, the rise of some of the African countries, and even now, some of the Middle Eastern countries you can see coming up and becoming formidable actors globally. So what you need to do is to transform the geopolitics of conflict into geopolitics of cooperation. And there are instances, in the discussion I can give example after example, where you have geopolitics of cooperation. So geopolitics is no longer only of conflict. There are instances where major actors who are otherwise in a conflicting situation but working together. You need to negotiate with the Tatmadaw, fostering civil military diplomacy. This is also very important. Given the history of Tatmadaw as very highly military-centric, I think one has to work on civil military diplomacy, and it's very important because way a military looks a civilian and way a civilian looks a military may not be always same. They have their own terminology, of using each other. So this is where you need a creative approach. Similarly, you need to negotiate with ethnic armed organizations, including the Arakan Army. And this is diplomacy beyond track one, because other ethnic armed organizations are equally important. At least 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 of them. Now, track to diplomacy, and this is the CRIC and UCL initiative, and we are now into phase 1. We are preparing the concept note, and it's ongoing. We have a presentation on 26 September at Winnipeg, Canada. As the council saying, you are most welcome to attend on that. And then, after that gets vetted, we start engaging with the stakeholders, and then move into phase 2, where you select the investment opportunities, you select the research team, the literature data, micronarrative, you work out the reports, and then you start negotiating the deal. As I said, it's a win-win situation because you don't lose on anything. Even if nothing happens, it becomes a publishable item in terms of knowing what to do, what are the things that will be required. So you don't lose out in any way. And you're not negating any of the other approaches, as I say, from the beginning. So it's an interesting initiative where I think a lot of researchers can get into, and of course, the Rohingya diaspora too would be part of this whole exercise. And the chances are that the Rohingya diaspora, by interacting with this process, can actually form a research entity, a civil entity, so that later they can also start negotiating with the Tatmadaw and the Arakan Army of resolving the conflict. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Sorry, any quick question?